It happened in the time it takes a traffic light to flip from yellow to red. Downtown lights hummed, a city bus sighed at the curb, and an autumn wind ran its fingers through paper cups and fallen flyers. On the corner of Pine and 7th, a man in a sun-faded field jacket sat on a flattened cardboard box, boots together, hands folded like he was guarding something no one else could see. His beard was trimmed short, his hair not so much. A small duffel rested at his feet, the canvas scarred, the zipper tab bent. A patrol car rolled up too fast for the empty lane, tires kissing the paint of the crosswalk. The passenger door swung wide. A uniformed officer, stocky, jaw tight, strode over with shoulders pitched forward like a challenge. His name tag flashed under the street lamp, R. Manning. Another officer, younger, lingered by the hood and watched. "Move it," Manning snapped. "You can't camp here." The man on the cardboard didn't lift his eyes right away. He spoke evenly, each word a steady breath. "I'm not camping, sir, just resting a minute." "Don't sir me." Manning's voice rose. "You people park where you want, beg where you want, moan about the system. I said move." A few pedestrians slowed. A teenager across the street angled his phone, camera already rolling, lens blinking like a tiny, unblinking accusation. The bus driver leaned out his window, lips parted, ready to yell or pray, maybe both. The man on the cardboard finally looked up. His eyes were clear, unnervingly calm. "Officer, I'll be gone in a minute. I'm just—" Manning's boot shot out, an ugly, reflexive arc that made the bystanders gasp in one voice. The kick caught the duffel and the man together, knocked him sideways, sent the cardboard skittering like a broken shield. The canvas bag burst open. A folded flag wrapped in plastic tumbled onto the concrete with a soft, traitorous thud. Something metallic clinked after it, a small case, its latch sprung, spilling ribbons and bronze circles stamped with eagles, stars, and years. No one breathed. Not the bus driver, not the kid with the phone, not the young officer by the hood. Manning blinked. What is all this?" The man pushed up to a knee, biting back a sound he refused to let out. He gathered the flag first, gentle hands, practiced hands, then the medals, one by one, like picking up pieces of a heartbeat. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence said it for him. From the bus window came a whisper that wasn't a whisper at all. "Those are service ribbons," the driver said, more to the wind than anyone. "Those are medals." The teen filming stepped closer. He caught the insignia in crisp, unforgiving video. The bronze star's edges, a purple ribbon pulsing in the streetlight, another round medal stamped with a wreath and courage no camera could weigh. His voice shook. "Yo, did you just kick a veteran?" Manning's jaw hardened. "Back up!" he barked, but the bite was gone. The young officer at the hood glanced at the spilled case, then at Manning, then at the man with the flag in his lap. Something flickered across his face, recognition or shame, before training pulled his features back into place. "ID," Manning demanded, but it came out softer than he wanted. "Let's see ID." The man looked from the officer to the medals and back. He set the flag on his knees, shoulders squaring in a way that transformed the field jacket. Suddenly, it was a uniform you could almost see. He reached into the duffel and retrieved a worn wallet. The plastic sleeve inside had been wiped so many times it had gone cloudy. He handed it over. The young cop took a step forward, as if to intervene, then stopped himself. Manning snatched the card, glanced at it, frowned, and looked again. The name hit him like a covert slap. Elijah J. Parker. The kid with the phone blurted it out first, reading over Manning's forearm from a respectful distance. "Elijah Parker?" He looked up, eyes wide. Like that Elijah Parker?" The bus driver's whisper became a low chant. "No way, no way." Manning's bluff faltered. "I don't care who you are," he said, too loud now, trying to outrun the panic nipping his heels. "You can't loiter here. City ordinance." "City ordinance doesn't say you can kick people," a woman called from the sidewalk. She had a tote bag full of groceries and a teacher's voice that carried. "Especially not someone who served." Elijah, if you knew the name, it felt wrong to think of him as anything else, kept his gaze level. "I wasn't asking for trouble," he said, "just asking for a minute to breathe." He started putting the medals back, but his hands stilled over one particular ribbon, fingertips hovering like a held note. He slid it in last, closed the case gently, then lifted the flag and cradled it like a glass thing. Manning shifted his weight. "You can't block pedestrian traffic." No one was blocked, the teenager said, turning his camera to show the wide-open sidewalk, the clean radius around the cardboard. This whole lane was clear. I got the whole thing. The younger officer cleared his throat. Sarge, maybe we de-escalate? It sounded foreign in his mouth, a borrowed word he wasn't sure he was allowed to use. Manning shot him a look. The look said, hold the line. The look said, don't make me the only one in this. But the line was already breaking, cracked by the flag on Elijah's lap, the metals glinting like stubborn stars, the camera lens grinding out a permanent memory. Elijah drew a breath, steady and deep. I'll move along, he said quietly. I don't want trouble for anyone. He looked at the flag and then at Manning again. But you don't get to do that. Not to me, not to anyone. Something in the way he said it, no heat, no swagger, made the words heavier, not lighter. The bystanders felt it. The teen lowered his phone a fraction as if giving the moment some kind of privacy, then lifted it again because the world needed to see. From the side street, a sedan eased to the curb. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out, clipped ID hanging from a lanyard. She took in the scene in a scan. The scattered ribbons, the folded flag, the tense line of Manning's shoulders, the audience of phones. She walked like time was expensive and she'd already paid for too much of it. Officer, she said, nodding at Manning without looking away from Elijah. Is there a problem here? Manning bristled. Routine vagrancy call. We're enforcing code. She crouched beside Elijah instead of answering, eyes softening. Sir, are you hurt? Elijah shook his head once. I'll manage. She met his gaze and something passed between them. Recognition not of a face, but of a posture, a weight carried for so long it had become a language. She stood, turned to the officers, and her voice changed shape. My name is Dana Rhodes, she said, holding up the badge. Assistant District Attorney. A ripple ran through the sidewalk crowd, a whisper that lifted the hair on the back of necks. Manning's stare turned brittle. ADA or not, he can't. ADA or not, she said, calm slicing cleanly through his protest. You will not put your hands or your boots on him again, or on anyone else sitting quietly on a piece of cardboard. The teenager's camera hummed. The bus driver leaned farther out, elbow on the window frame. The city suddenly very, very still. Rhodes looked back to Elijah, her tone gentler again. Mr. Parker, do you have somewhere safe to go tonight? Elijah's jaw worked, a flicker of something like embarrassment crossing his face. I'm fine, he said. I've been fine a long time. Rhodes nodded, not arguing with a man who'd clearly had enough of being argued with. She faced Manning once more. We're going to review every second of this interaction. Do you understand me? Manning swallowed. The word yes stuck like a burr in his throat. Elijah rose, slow but steady, duffel over one shoulder, flag cradled in the crook of his arm. He looked at the huddle of phones, at the strangers who had coalesced into something like a crowd, maybe even a community, for the span of a single traffic light. Thank you, he said. Not a performance, a fact. The light changed to green. Nobody moved. Mr. Parker, Rhodes said carefully, would you mind coming with me to the precinct? Voluntarily. I want your statement and I think a lot of people would like to know your story. Manning flinched at that. Your story, as if the words themselves were a kind of indictment. Elijah glanced at the badge, at the street, at the folded flag, then gave a single, quiet nod. He didn't know that by morning his name would be on every screen in the city. He didn't know the kick would become a match and his medals a mirror. He only knew the wind had shifted. And somewhere down the block, a siren started to wail like a distant, inevitable truth. By the time Elijah Parker walked into the precinct beside ADA Dana Rhodes, the video had already exploded across social media. The teenager's upload, shaky at first, then zooming perfectly on the flag, the medals, and the officer's kick, had been shared thousands of times within the hour. Captions screamed across timelines. Cop kicks homeless man, he's a veteran. Elijah Parker, the war hero sleeping on cardboard. This is how we treat our soldiers? On sidewalks, in coffee shops, in quiet apartments where the evening news flickered, people were watching. Inside the precinct, Rhodes kept her tone even. Mr. Parker, please have a seat in here. She guided Elijah into a conference room, far from the uniformed stairs. She gestured for an officer she trusted, Sergeant Alvarez, to bring water. Elijah sat stiffly, the flag still folded against his chest, duffel strap looped across one shoulder. He looked less like a man seeking pity than a soldier waiting for orders. Rhodes leaned across the table. I know this isn't easy, but I need you to tell me your story, not just for the record, but for yourself. Because whether you want it or not, the world is listening. Elijah's jaw worked silently. At last he set the flag gently on the table. His hands hovered over it, as though afraid to let go. I served 22 years, he said, his voice rough but steady. I enlisted straight out of a high school, Army Rangers. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, lost brothers, saved some too. Came home with a chest of medals and a head that doesn't sleep right. He looked away, his eyes hardening. My wife passed 6 years ago. Cancer. House went not long after. Savings burned fast. VA's still processing paperwork. And here I am. Cardboard for a mattress. Rhodes nodded slowly, her throat tight. And yesterday, Officer Manning decided you were disposable. Elijah's lips twitched in something between a smile and a grimace. He didn't know who I was. That's the point, isn't it? You shouldn't have to be someone to deserve respect. Meanwhile, on the other side of the precinct, Manning slammed his locker shut, face red. His younger partner muttered, Sarge, the video, it's everywhere. Manning snapped, it's edited, out of context. They'll spin it like they always do. But doubt lingered in his voice. In the corner, a group of officers whispered. Some shook their heads. A veteran cop muttered, he kicked a guy holding a folded flag. That image will bury us. By late evening, national outlets had picked up the story. Cable news anchors replayed the clip on loop. Veterans groups issued statements of outrage. Hashtags trended. Hashtag justice. For Elijah, hashtag respect. Our heroes. Amanda Torres, the local reporter who had covered Maya Ellis weeks earlier, appeared live outside the precinct. Tonight, Brookdale finds itself at the center of another storm. A homeless man assaulted by police has been revealed as decorated war hero Elijah Parker. The footage is sparking outrage nationwide. Behind her, candles flickered where citizens had begun a small vigil, placing flags and handwritten signs. We stand with Elijah. Back in the conference room, Rhodes leaned forward. Mr. Parker, the world is already on your side. If you're willing, we can push for charges. Assault under color of authority, civil rights violations. Manning can be held accountable. Elijah's brow furrowed. Charges won't change the past. They won't give me a home. No, Rhodes said softly, but they can set a precedent. They can tell the next officer, think twice before you treat a human being like trash, and they can remind the town of who you are. Elijah glanced at the folded flag, then back at her. I never wanted a spotlight, but maybe if it helps the next guy on cardboard, I'll stand in it. Rhodes exhaled, relief flickering in her eyes. Then we'll move forward. She paused. But first, I want you to know, thank you. For your service and for your courage now. Not everyone could sit here after what happened and speak with this much dignity. Elijah shook his head slowly. Dignity's all I've got left. Can't let them take that too. By midnight, the story dominated national broadcasts. Viewers watched the same loop. Manning's boot striking, the flag tumbling, the medals spilling. Then Elijah's calm face, eyes clear even in humiliation. Calls flooded Brookdale City Hall. The mayor's voicemail box filled within an hour. Veterans from across the country vowed to protest if Manning wasn't suspended immediately. Manning himself sat at home, blinds drawn, TV muted, phone buzzing nonstop. His wife whispered, "What did you do?" But he had no answer that would make sense. At dawn, Elijah was escorted quietly out of the precinct. Rhodes had arranged temporary housing at a veterans shelter. As he walked, duffel at his side and flag in his arms, cameras clicked. Reporters shouted questions. Elijah said nothing. He didn't need to. The image spoke louder than words, a soldier who had given everything, now carrying the weight of both medals and injustice. Rhodes walked beside him, her face set. "This isn't over," she murmured. "But today, you're not invisible anymore." Elijah gave a faint nod, eyes scanning the horizon where protesters were gathering, flags held high. For the first time in years, he felt the hum of something he thought he'd lost. Not just dignity, belonging. The city was waking up to its shame, and to his story. By morning, the city of Brookdale was buzzing. Newspapers hit doorsteps with bold headlines. Homeless veteran assaulted by cop. Hero kicked on sidewalk. TV screens in diners, gyms, and living rooms replayed the same 30-second clip. Officer Manning's boot connecting, the flag and medals scattering. Elijah Parker's quiet dignity as he gathered them up. The footage was unavoidable and unforgettable. At the precinct, tension crackled like static. Officers gathered in the briefing room, whispers darting between them. Some were defensive, it's being blown out of proportion, but others shifted uncomfortably, unable to deny what the world had seen. The police chief, a grizzled man named Wallace, entered with a face carved from stone. He didn't bother with preamble. "Officer Manning, step forward." Manning rose, jaw tight, shoulders squared as though defiance might shield him. "You are hereby suspended without pay, pending investigation," Wallace declared. "Turn in your badge and weapon." A gasp rolled through the room. Manning's face flushed crimson. "Chief, this is political theater. That man was trespassing." Wallace's voice cut sharper. "That man is a decorated war hero, and you disgrace this department on camera, badge and weapon, now." Silence pressed on the room. Manning slapped his badge on the table, unholstered his gun with a clatter, and stormed out. Cameras waited outside, catching every second of his walk of shame. Across town, Elijah sat quietly in the common room of a veterans shelter. He wore a clean shirt donated by the staff, but his field jacket was still draped over his shoulders, sleeves frayed from years of weather. On the wall, a television played the news. The anchor's voice was firm. "Officer Manning has been suspended. The DA's office has confirmed that formal charges are being considered." Other veterans in the room clapped him on the back. One man, in a wheelchair, said, "You stood up without even trying, brother. Proud of you." Elijah gave a small nod, but inside, unease gnawed. He hadn't asked for this spotlight. He had only wanted a quiet corner to breathe. Still, as he looked at the folded flag on his lap, something in him knew. Maybe this was bigger than his comfort. Maybe this was about every forgotten soldier sitting on cardboard. That afternoon, the protests swelled. What began as a vigil had grown into hundreds gathered outside City Hall. Veterans carried flags, families held signs, and chants echoed down Main Street. "Justice for Elijah! Respect our heroes!" Amanda Torres stood in the center, microphone in hand, reporting live. The suspension of Officer Manning has only fueled public anger. Citizens are demanding accountability not just for one officer, but for how the city treats its most vulnerable. She turned as the crowd erupted in cheers. Elijah Parker, escorted by ADA Rhodes and Sergeant Alvarez, approached the steps. Cameras surged forward, flashes lighting the gray afternoon. Elijah paused, flag tucked under his arm, medals secured in his duffel. For a long moment, he just looked at the crowd, at the faces chanting his name. Then he spoke. His voice low but carrying, each word etched with weight. "I didn't want this. I didn't ask for this. But last night I realized something. Respect shouldn't depend on what's in your past. It should be given because we're human." The crowd hushed, listening. "I fought overseas because I believed in something bigger than myself. And I'll stand here today for the same reason. Not for recognition, not for medals, but because no man, no woman, no veteran, no child should ever be treated like they're less than human." The cheers that followed shook the building. Inside City Hall, officials watched nervously from behind glass windows. The mayor shifted in his suit, sweat beading his brow. "This is getting out of control," he muttered. A council member replied, "No, sir, this is justice catching up." That evening, networks across the country played Elijah's words alongside the footage of Manning's kick. Commentators called it a turning point, a lesson in humility, a reminder of what service truly means. Veterans organizations announced plans to rally in Brookdale. Donations flooded into shelters. Social media lit up with people offering Elijah a place to stay, a job, a fresh start. For the first time in years, Elijah felt seen, not as a problem to be moved along, but as a man whose story mattered. But in the shadows, Manning seethed. Watching the coverage from his darkened living room, he clenched his fists until his knuckles cracked. His phone buzzed with messages from sympathetic voices, urging him to fight back, to expose the system. His eyes narrowed at the screen. They think they can end me with one video? Not yet. He poured another drink, the reflection of Elijah Parker's face on the TV glinting back at him like an accusation he couldn't escape. Back at the shelter, Elijah sat with Rhodes and Alvarez. The ADA leaned forward. "Mr. Parker, the city is listening now. We can press charges, yes, but this isn't just about Manning. We can push for broader reforms, training, oversight, resources for veterans. If you're willing to stand with us, we can change more than one life." Elijah's gaze drifted to the flag folded beside him. His voice was quiet, but certain. Then let's do it. Not for me, for everyone still invisible out there. Rhodes nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. Then this isn't the end. This is the beginning. The morning sun broke through the clouds, but the city felt heavier than ever. Brookdale had become the center of a national storm, and everyone could feel the tremors. Cable news trucks lined the street outside City Hall. Protesters arrived before dawn, their voices echoing down Main Street like drums of change. Inside his modest room at the veterans' shelter, Elijah Parker sat at the edge of the bed, tying the laces on boots that had seen desert sand and mountain dust. They were worn thin, but still serviceable. He looked at the folded flag on the dresser, then at his reflection in the cracked mirror. His face was tired, his beard a little unkempt, but his eyes carried the same steel that once steadied men in firefights thousands of miles away. ADA Dana Rhodes knocked lightly on the doorframe before stepping inside. She carried a folder thick with papers and her usual clipped efficiency. "Morning, Elijah. How are you holding up?" He gave a short nod. "I've had worse mornings." She studied him. "The crowd out there is growing. They want to hear from you again. I know you didn't ask for this, but whether you like it or not, you've become a symbol." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Symbols don't bleed, men do. I just don't want this to turn into another circus." Rhodes softened her tone. "It's not a circus when it's truth, and truth needs a face. Right now, that's you." Across town, Officer Manning sat hunched over his kitchen table, blinds drawn, half-empty glass in his hand. His suspension had cut deep, but what gnawed at him more was the video playing non-stop on every channel. His boot. That flag. The metals clattering. His wife stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You humiliated this family," she hissed. "Our kids are afraid to go to school. Do you even understand what you've done?" Manning slammed the glass down hard enough to crack it. "I was doing my job. That man was loitering. He's just another homeless—" He cut himself off, the words sticking in his throat. Even he couldn't finish the sentence anymore. The phone on the table buzzed. He glanced at the number, blocked. A voice on the other end growled when he answered. "They're throwing you to the wolves. You don't go down alone. Tell your story. Fight back." Manning's grip tightened. "Maybe I will." By midday, the protests swelled into thousands. Veterans arrived in uniform pieces, caps, jackets, patches, forming a visible wall of solidarity. They held signs. "He fought for us. We stand for him." Television crews captured the powerful image, broadcasting it across the country. Elijah was escorted through the crowd to the steps of City Hall. Phones lifted, flashes popped, chants surged. He hesitated, flag clutched against his chest, the weight of so many eyes pressing down. Rhodes whispered at his side, "Just speak from your heart." Elijah stepped up to the microphone. His voice was steady, but quiet enough that the crowd leaned forward to catch every word. "I didn't ask to stand here. I never wanted fame or headlines. I served my country because I believed in protecting people. That doesn't stop when the uniform comes off. Respect isn't charity. It's the least we owe each other." He lifted the folded flag slightly, the sunlight catching its edges. "I carry this because it reminds me of brothers I lost. They gave everything. And if they were here, they'd say the same thing. Dignity doesn't depend on a roof over your head or money in your pocket. It depends on recognizing each other as human." The crowd erupted, chants roaring louder than before. Reporters scribbled furiously, microphones thrust forward. Inside City Hall, the mayor watched nervously through the blinds. His aide whispered, "Public pressure's not going away. We can't ride this out." The mayor rubbed his temples. "Suspend Manning? Done. But now they want reform, oversight, funding for shelters. We don't have the budget." "You don't have a choice," the aide interrupted. "The world is watching. You either stand with Parker or you go down with Manning." The mayor's silence was its own answer. That night, national broadcasts played Elijah's words beside Manning's suspension footage. Analysts called it a watershed moment. Hashtags spread beyond veterans groups. Parents, teachers, nurses, even celebrities amplified his story. Donations poured into shelters, job programs, and veteran services. But Manning wasn't done. He appeared on a late-night podcast hosted by a fringe commentator. His voice was defensive, bitter. "They're crucifying me for doing my job. That man was trespassing. They're turning a thug into a saint because he's got a few medals." Clips of his rant circulated online within hours. Instead of sympathy, it sparked fury. One tweet with 1 million views read, "He didn't just kick a veteran. He's still spitting on him." Back at the shelter, Elijah sat quietly in the common room, watching the backlash unfold. A younger veteran turned to him. "You see what you've done? You've lit a fire, brother." Elijah shook his head. "I didn't light it. The truth did. I just stopped hiding it." Rhodes entered, holding her phone. "Elijah, tomorrow we push for charges. Assault, civil rights violations, the works. Manning is finished. But this isn't just about him anymore. Brookdale has to change." Elijah leaned back, the weight of her words settling on him. He glanced at the flag in his lap, then at the hopeful eyes of the men around him. "Then let's make sure this isn't just about me," he said. "Let's make sure it's about everyone who's been ignored." Rhodes smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." By sunrise, Brookdale was no longer just a town with a scandal. It was a symbol. National networks camped outside City Hall, satellite dishes rising like iron trees. Commentators argued on morning shows about policing, homelessness, and veterans' rights. And in the middle of it all stood Elijah Parker, a man who had once been invisible, now carrying the weight of a nation's eyes. The city council chamber filled before the gavel ever struck. Reporters crammed against the walls, cameras perched on tripods, citizens packed shoulder to shoulder in every available seat. Outside, hundreds more chanted beneath fluttering flags. The buzz in the room was electric, tension and anticipation woven together like wire. Mayor Coleman adjusted his tie nervously, sweat beading at his temple. He whispered to the council president, "We'll calm them down, show we're listening. That's all they want." But the council president's frown said otherwise. "They don't want promises anymore, sir. They want action." Elijah sat in the front row, the folded flag across his knees. Beside him, ADA Donna Rhodes organized papers in a neat stack. Sergeant Alvarez stood behind them, watchful, scanning every doorway. When the gavel struck, the chamber hushed. Mayor Coleman cleared his throat. "Citizens of Brookdale, we hear your voices. We recognize the pain this incident has caused and the importance of restoring trust in the city's institutions. Officer Manning has been suspended and an investigation is underway." Murmurs of discontent rose from the crowd. A woman shouted, "That's not enough." Another added, "One man didn't cause this. The whole system's broken." Coleman raised his hands. "Please, allow us to explain our plan. We will review police training procedures and—" The chamber erupted. Veterans stood in unison, their jackets and caps broadcasting decades of service. A man with a cane slammed it against the floor. "Review? While men like Parker are left on sidewalks? That's your solution?" Rhodes rose smoothly, her voice cutting through the noise. "With respect, Mayor, reviews don't save lives. Accountability does. This city owes more than vague promises. It owes justice." The cameras swung toward Elijah. The crowd quieted as if expecting him to speak, though no one had asked him to. He stood slowly, flag tucked under his arm. "I never wanted a spotlight," Elijah began, his voice steady. "But I know what I saw when I was on that sidewalk. I saw a man with a badge decide I wasn't worth respect. And I know I'm not the only one it's happened to." He turned, eyes sweeping the chamber. "I served this country for 22 years. I bled for it. I buried friends for it. And when I came home, I slept on cardboard. That's not just my story. It's the story of too many. And it's not enough to punish one man and walk away like the rest of it doesn't exist." The room held its breath. Even Coleman's hands trembled on the podium. Elijah continued, "You want to fix this? Start by funding the shelters that keep men like me alive. Start by training officers to see human beings before they see problems. Start by remembering that dignity isn't optional, it's the foundation." Thunderous applause erupted. Veterans saluted, citizens cheered, and cameras flashed. Elijah sat back down, his jaw set, his hands steady on the flag. The council chambers descended into chaos after that. Coleman whispered furiously to aides, while Rhodes leaned toward Elijah, her eyes sharp. That was more powerful than anything I could have argued. But not everyone was moved. Outside the chamber, a group of Manning's defenders gathered, waving signs that read, "Support our police and stop the smear." They chanted loudly, their voices clashing with the crowd supporting Elijah. Manning himself sat in his car blocks away, watching the live stream on his phone. His face darkened with every cheer Elijah received. He muttered, "They think he's a saint? They'll see the truth soon enough." His fingers drummed the steering wheel, already plotting his next move. By evening, the council voted unanimously to adopt emergency reforms: independent oversight for the police department, increased funding for shelters, and mandatory de-escalation training. Coleman announced the measures with a strained smile, knowing the decision wasn't his victory but the people's demand. Outside, Amanda Torres reported live to a national audience. In a stunning reversal, Brookdale's council has agreed to sweeping reforms, and at the heart of it all is Elijah Parker, whose quiet dignity has become a rallying cry across the country. Elijah stood on the steps afterward, surrounded by veterans and citizens alike. A woman placed a small bouquet of flowers in his hand. "For your wife," she said softly, though she didn't know his story. Elijah's throat tightened as he whispered, "Thank you." That night at the shelter, Elijah sat alone in the quiet common room. He unfolded the flag and smoothed its edges carefully on the table. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible, but he also knew visibility was dangerous. Rhodes entered, a folder under her arm. "You realize, Elijah, this doesn't end here. The reforms are a start, but Manning's supporters will fight back. And Manning himself, he's not finished." Elijah didn't look up. "Neither am I." Rhodes studied him, then nodded. "Then let's be ready." The reforms passed by the council made national headlines, but Brookdale's streets didn't fall quiet. Instead, the city split in two. On one side stood citizens, veterans, and families chanting for justice. On the other, a rising wave of Manning's supporters, furious at what they saw as betrayal of the police force. Within days, counter-protesters filled the sidewalks across from Elijah's supporters. Their signs shouted, "Back the blue," and "Stop vilifying officers." Some wore masks, their voices dripping with anger. Clashes erupted at night, fists thrown, bottles shattered. In the veterans' shelter, Elijah sat in the common room, the TV flashing images of unrest outside. His knuckles tightened around the armrest of his chair. He recognized the tactic. It was familiar from war zones. When truth gained ground, chaos was unleashed to distract from it. ADA Dana Rhodes walked in, a folder under her arm, her expression stormy. "The counter-protests aren't random. We've traced organizers back to a network tied to Manning's allies. He's not just sulking, he's mobilizing." Sergeant Alvarez, who had become Elijah's shadow since the council showdown, added, "We picked up chatter about a rally planned for tomorrow. They want to paint Manning as the real victim." Elijah's voice was quiet but steady. "He kicked me in broad daylight, on camera, with a folded flag in my arms. That truth doesn't change no matter how loud they yell." Rhodes exhaled. "Yes, but truth can be buried under noise. And right now, noise is their weapon." The next afternoon, Elijah walked into the Veterans Hall downtown, where community leaders had gathered. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and determination. Men and women, teachers, pastors, shopkeepers, turned toward him, their applause warm but restrained. Pastor Green, a tall man with graying hair, spoke first. "Elijah, the city looks to you now, not just as a veteran, but as the face of what's right. But you need to understand, they'll try to break you. They'll dig into your past, twist your story, anything to silence you." Elijah's gaze dropped to the flag folded in his hands. "They can dig all they want. My past is written in blood, in medals I never asked for. If they want to smear me, let them try." Green leaned closer. "Your courage is why people follow you, but don't carry this weight alone. We march with you, remember that." That night, Manning appeared on a local talk show, streamed live online. His voice dripped with venom. "They're destroying good cops for political gain. That so-called hero, Parker, he's no saint. He's unstable, a drifter. They won't tell you that." Within minutes, clips of his words spread across social media. But instead of building sympathy, they sparked outrage. Veterans posted photos of themselves with signs, "If Parker's unstable, then so am I." Families of fallen soldiers tweeted, "We trust Elijah Parker. He earned his dignity. Manning lost his." Even so, the smear campaign gained traction in certain circles. Anonymous accounts spread rumors, doctored photos, half-truths. Elijah's phone buzzed with threats, texts calling him a fraud, a parasite. He sat in his shelter room staring at the messages, the weight pressing on his chest. For the first time, doubt crept in. Would the noise drown out the truth after all? Rhodes found him there, hunched forward, the glow of his phone harsh against his face. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't read them. That's what they want." Elijah looked up, his eyes shadowed. I fought in battles where bullets filled the air and it never shook me like this. Words, they cut deeper than steel sometimes. Rhodes knelt beside him. Then let us fight the words. Let us show the world the truth they can't bury. The next day, the counter-protest unfolded, just as Alvarez had warned. Manning's supporters marched through downtown, waving flags, chanting his name. They carried signs calling Elijah a liar, a fake. Some shouted insults toward veterans standing on the opposite sidewalk. Police formed a shaky line between the groups. Tension snapped when a bottle flew, then another. Chaos ignited in seconds. Shouts, fists, police whistles piercing the air. Elijah stood at the edge, flag in his arms, watching the clash unfold. He wanted to step forward, to shout, to fight back, but Green's words echoed. Don't carry this alone. Instead, he lifted the flag high, the crowd catching sight of it above the chaos. For a moment, the noise dimmed. Protesters froze, cameras turned, chants faltered. The image spread like wildfire. Elijah Parker, silent in the storm, flag raised above the fray. That night, news anchors called it the moment that stopped a riot. Commentators replayed the footage, describing how the sight of a veteran's dignity calmed the chaos that politics had stirred. Elijah sat in the shelter afterward, exhaustion etched deep in his features. Alvarez clapped a hand on his shoulder. You didn't say a word and you still shouted louder than all of them. Elijah managed a faint smile. Sometimes silence carries further than noise. But Manning wasn't finished. Watching the footage, he slammed his fist against the table. They worship him now? This ends with me in prison and him a saint? No, I won't let it. He leaned closer to the camera of his laptop, recording another video, his eyes burning. If they want war, I'll give them war. The storm was far from over. The city of Brookdale hadn't seen this much national attention in decades. Major networks camped outside the courthouse. Editorials in the New York Times and Washington Post debated the meaning of Elijah Parker's stand. On talk radio, callers argued whether he was a hero or a distraction from real issues. But inside the veterans' shelter, life was anything but glamorous. Elijah sat at a corner table, flag resting nearby, as volunteers served dinner. His appetite was gone. The threats on his phone had multiplied. Messages filled with slurs, promises of violence, even photos of his old military unit crudely edited with crosses drawn through faces. Sergeant Alvarez leaned over his shoulder, scanning one of the texts. We're tracing them. Most are cowards hiding behind fake accounts, but a few are local. We're keeping eyes on you. Elijah gave a slow nod, voice flat. I fought insurgents who hid behind shadows. Now I fight men who hide behind screens. Feels the same. Alvarez clapped his shoulder. Difference is, here, we can bring them into the light. Meanwhile, ADA Dana Rhodes was buried in paperwork at her office, files stacked on her desk like barricades. She was preparing formal charges against Officer Manning. Assault, abuse of authority, violation of civil rights. Her assistant knocked and entered with a grim look. Donna, we just got a leak. Manning's defense team plans to smear Parker's record. They're digging into VA documents, looking for any medical notes they can twist into a narrative of instability. Rhodes rubbed her temples. Of course they are. When you can't fight the truth, you smear the truth teller. She stood, voice hardening. Then we fight back. Full disclosure of his service record, commendations, and medals. If Manning wants to drag Parker through the mud, we'll show the world the ground he's standing on is sacred. That night, Manning appeared again on social media. This time, his video was more polished. Sitting in a clean suit, he spoke directly into the camera. They want you to believe I assaulted a hero. But let's look closer. This so-called veteran has been living on the streets for years. Why? Because he couldn't handle civilian life. Because he's unstable, and now they're using him to destroy a good cop's career. Within hours, the clip spread. Some praised him, but far more condemned him. Veterans groups doubled down, releasing statements. Elijah Parker served with honor. His hardships do not erase his sacrifices, they magnify them. Still, the smear left Elijah uneasy. Sitting in his room, he muttered, "They'll turn my scars into shame." Rhodes, who had come to check on him, crouched beside his chair. Listen to me, scars aren't shame, they're proof of survival, and the more they attack you, the more they reveal their fear of your truth. Elijah looked at her, the weight in his eyes softening slightly. You really believe this fight can change something? I don't just believe it, she said firmly. I see it happening. The next morning, the shelter awoke to chaos outside. Protesters from both sides had returned, shouting across barricades. Veterans lined up shoulder to shoulder against Manning's supporters, holding flags as shields against insults hurled their way. Amanda Torres, reporting live, narrated the scene. Brookdale remains divided, but the image of veterans standing silently, flags in hand, has struck a chord nationwide. The question now is whether Elijah Parker himself will take the stand in the coming trial. Inside, Elijah heard the chants through the window. He tightened his grip on the duffel containing his medals. "If they want my story in court, they'll get it," he said quietly. Alvarez frowned. "Testifying puts you at risk. Manning's people will rip into you, try to break you in front of the jury." Elijah stood, shoulders straightening until his worn jacket looked almost like a uniform again. "I've faced worse fire. If my silence lets them win, then what was the point of surviving all those years?" Later that day, Rhodes gathered Elijah, Alvarez, and Pastor Green in a conference room. Papers, photos, and video stills lay across the table. "The trial is coming," Rhodeson said. "And Elijah, your testimony will be the cornerstone. We'll prepare you for every question, every smear, but you need to decide now if you're ready." Elijah's gaze drifted to a photo of himself in uniform, years younger, medals pinned to his chest. He touched the edge of the photo lightly. "I didn't come this far to back down," he said. "If my story can stop another man from being treated the way I was, then I'll tell it. Every scar, every failure, every truth. Let them hear it." Green nodded, pride in his eyes. "Then we'll stand with you. You won't face this alone." That evening, Elijah walked outside to meet the veterans holding vigil. They greeted him with salutes, their eyes fierce with respect. Elijah raised the flag high, the crowd falling silent as he spoke. "They think they can break me with lies, but they don't understand. The truth is heavier than lies, and I've carried heavier things before." The crowd erupted in cheers, cameras flashed, and somewhere in the city, Manning scowled at the screen, rage twisting his face. "This isn't over," Manning muttered, "not by a long shot." The courthouse loomed over downtown Brookdale like an old sentinel, its stone steps worn smooth from decades of footsteps. Soon, Elijah Parker's story would echo through its halls, and the city's eyes would focus on a single courtroom. Inside the veterans' shelter, Elijah sat with ADA Dana Rhodes, Sergeant Alvarez, and Pastor Green. The table before them was cluttered with files, transcripts, and a laptop glowing with slides of Manning's disciplinary record. Rhodes tapped a page sharply. "This is where we strike," she said. "Officer Manning has a history, complaints about excessive force, ignored by the department. Your case isn't isolated. It's the one that broke through because of that video. In court, we tie it all together." Elijah leaned back, the flag folded neatly on his lap. "They'll drag me through the mud, Dana. Call me unstable, homeless. Say I'm unfit to be believed." Rhodes met his gaze, unflinching. "Then we show them who you really are. Not just a veteran, not just a man on a sidewalk, but someone who carried this country on his shoulders. They can smear, but they can't erase truth." Meanwhile, in a dimly lit apartment across town, Manning sat with his lawyer and a small group of supporters. His eyes burned with bitterness as he scrolled through articles labeling him a disgrace. His lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, pushed a folder forward. "We emphasize Parker's instability. Years on the streets, possible PTSD, financial ruin. We don't deny the kick. We frame it as a necessary action against a threatening loiterer." Manning sneered. "Threatening? He was sitting on cardboard with a bag of junk." "Then that's your story," the lawyer said. "You acted within ordinance. Don't show doubt. Doubt is weakness." Manning's fists tightened. "They think he's some saint. Wait until I'm on the stand. I'll bury him." But even as he said it, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He knew the video, the boot, the medals, the flag, was an image no courtroom could erase. Back at the shelter, Elijah began mock testimony. Rhodes questioned him relentlessly, her voice sharp. "Mr. Parker, why were you sitting on that sidewalk?" "I was resting," Elijah replied calmly, "carrying my duffel, looking for a place to breathe." Rhodes leaned forward. "Were you loitering?" "I wasn't blocking anyone. The sidewalk was clear. I was harming no one." "And when Officer Manning approached?" Elijah paused, eyes distant, then steadied his voice. "He told me to move. I said I would. Then he kicked me. My medals spilled. My flag hit the ground. That flag has covered coffins of men I loved. I don't think he even saw it. He just saw someone he thought was beneath him." The room was silent. Pastor Green whispered, "That'll move a jury's heart if nothing else." Rhodes nodded. And that's what wins cases, truth wrapped in humanity. You don't embellish, you don't argue, you tell it straight like you just did. Outside the courthouse, tension was already mounting. Barricades lined the steps. Reporters jostled for prime camera positions. Veterans set up a vigil across the street, holding flags through the night. On the opposite sidewalk, Manning's supporters gathered, their chants bitter, their signs crude. Amanda Torres reported live, Brookdale is bracing for what may become one of the most publicized trials in recent memory. For many, Elijah Parker represents respect owed to every veteran. For others, this case is a battle over the very soul of law enforcement. That evening, Elijah walked out to the shelter courtyard. The air was crisp, the sky painted with streaks of orange and purple. Alvarez joined him, lighting a cigarette but keeping it low out of respect. "You ready for tomorrow?" the sergeant asked. Elijah chuckled dryly. "I was never ready for the wars I fought either. But I fought anyway." Alvarez nodded. "You know, the men I served with, they always said the hardest battles aren't with rifles. They're with words. And you've got more weight in your words than you realize." Elijah looked down at the folded flag in his hands. "It's not just my story on trial. It's everyone's who's ever been stepped on." That night, Rhodes received an anonymous envelope slid under her office door. Inside were photographs of Elijah sleeping on benches, eating at soup kitchens, his beard longer, his jacket dirtier. Scribbled across one photo were the words, "This is your hero?" She clenched her jaw and dialed Alvarez. "They're trying to intimidate us, but all this proves is how far they'll go to bury the truth." Alvarez grunted. "Let them try. We'll keep Parker safe. And when he takes that stand, the jury won't see a homeless man. They'll see a soldier who never stopped fighting." As midnight approached, Elijah sat at his small desk in the shelter, writing in a battered notebook. His words were simple, written in the same hand that once jotted orders on desert maps. "Tomorrow I tell my story. Not for me, for the brothers I lost, for the flag they folded, for the ones still sleeping on cardboard tonight. I survived bullets, blasts, and silence. I can survive this too." He closed the notebook, placed the flag gently on top of it, and finally lay down. For the first time in weeks, he slept without fear, because tomorrow, his silence would end. The courthouse smelled of old wood and dust, its marble floors polished by years of footsteps. By sunrise, the building was already surrounded by news vans, flashing cameras, and two rival crowds chanting across police barricades. On one side, veterans stood silently with flags folded against their chests. On the other, Manning's supporters shouted through megaphones, their signs declaring, "Protect our police" and "Don't be fooled." Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Reporters filled the gallery. Families clutched programs like shields. Security officers lined the walls, tense and alert. Elijah Parker entered quietly, flanked by ADA Dana Rhodes and Sergeant Alvarez. He wore a clean shirt and pressed slacks donated by the shelter, but his old field jacket still clung to his shoulders. In his arms, as always, was the folded flag. The room hushed as he walked past. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled. Even Manning, seated at the defense table, looked up and scowled, his jaw tight. Judge Whitaker, an older man with steel-gray hair, banged the gavel. "Court is now in session. State of Brookdale versus Officer Richard Manning." Rhodes rose first, her voice firm. "Your Honor, members of the jury, this case is about dignity. A decorated war hero was assaulted while sitting peacefully on a sidewalk. His only crime? Being invisible to the man sworn to protect him. We will prove that Officer Manning not only abused his authority, but also violated the very values this uniform should stand for." The jury leaned forward. Then Manning's attorney, sleek in a navy suit, rose. His smile was polished, his words sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not what the media circus wants you to believe." Officer Manning responded to a vagrancy call, approached a suspicious individual, and acted within ordinance. This isn't about race or medals or sob stories. This is about a cop doing his job. A murmur rippled through the room. Elijah sat still, his hands pressed firmly on the flag. The first witness was the teenager who had filmed the video. His voice shook, but his words cut like glass. "I saw everything. Mr. Parker wasn't bothering anyone. He was just sitting there. The officer kicked him and then the metal spilled out. I'll never forget that sound." The jury watched the video again on the courtroom screen. The boot, the duffel, the flag tumbling. Gasps filled the room just as they had on the street that night. Manning shifted uncomfortably, avoiding the jury's eyes. The bus driver testified next, his cap in his hands. I've driven routes for 20 years. I know trouble when I see it. Mr. Parker wasn't trouble. What I saw was disrespect, to him and to every soldier who ever wore a uniform. By the time Rhodes rested her first day of witnesses, the jury's faces were heavy with thought. During recess, Elijah stepped into the hallway. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. He didn't answer. He stood silently, flag in his arms, the noise crashing around him like surf against rock. Rhodes touched his elbow. Tomorrow, it's your turn on the stand. Be ready. I've been ready my whole life, Elijah said softly. The next morning, the defense launched its counterattack. Manning's lawyer hammered witnesses with questions, painting Elijah as unstable. Isn't it true Mr. Parker has lived on the streets for years? Yes. And doesn't that suggest he cannot manage his life responsibly? Rhodes objected, but the seed was planted. The lawyer pressed further, weaving a narrative of instability, of a man broken beyond credibility. Manning sat straighter as his attorney spoke, lips curling into a faint, satisfied smile. But then Rhodes called Elijah to the stand. The courtroom fell silent as he walked forward, flag still under his arm. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and sat. Rhodes stepped closer. Mr. Parker, please tell the court who you are. Elijah's voice was low, but every syllable carried. My name is Elijah James Parker. I served 22 years in the United States Army, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. I lost friends who never came home. And when I did, I carried their memory in this flag. He laid the folded cloth gently on the witness stand. This flag has been on coffins. It deserves more respect than it got that night. The jury leaned in, rapt. Rhodes nodded. And why were you on that sidewalk? I was resting, Elijah said simply. I told the officer I would move, but he didn't wait. He kicked me. My medals fell to the ground. He didn't see a man. He saw someone to step on. A hush spread over the room. Even the defense attorney paused, momentarily thrown. Then came cross-examination. The lawyer circled Elijah like a vulture. Mr. Parker, isn't it true you've struggled with PTSD? Yes, Elijah answered plainly. And isn't it true you've been homeless for years? Yes. So why should this jury believe you're a reliable witness? Elijah looked directly at the jury, unblinking. Because scars don't erase truth. Because I may sleep on cardboard, but I remember every detail of that night. And because dignity doesn't require a home, it requires humanity. And he took that from me. The jury sat frozen. Even Judge Whitaker's gavel seemed unnecessary in the weight of the silence that followed. When court adjourned, Elijah walked down the courthouse steps into a sea of supporters. Veterans saluted, families cheered, and reporters surged forward. Amanda Torres reported live, her voice filled with awe. Today, Elijah Parker's testimony electrified the courtroom. His words, simple, honest, and unshakable, may very well decide this case. Inside his car, blocks away, Manning slammed his fists on the steering wheel. He's turning them against me, he growled. But I'm not done yet. The war was no longer on the sidewalk. It was in the courtroom, and the battle for truth had only just begun. The day after Elijah Parker's testimony, Brookdale was no longer the same city. His words had replayed on every news station, clipped into sound bites, quoted across headlines. Scars don't erase truth. Dignity doesn't require a home. Veterans groups adopted those lines as rallying cries. Celebrities tweeted them. Crowds outside the courthouse swelled to thousands, candles flickering in vigils that stretched through the night. But inside the police department, the mood soured into paranoia. In the locker room, officers whispered when Manning's name came up. Some still defended him. He was just doing his job. But others avoided eye contact, guilt gnawing at their silence. One officer, a veteran named Jenkins, muttered to his partner, "That could have been me back from deployment trying to find my footing. If Manning can do that to Parker, he can do it to anyone." For the first time, the Brotherhood of Blue showed cracks. At the courthouse, ADA Dana Rhodes prepared her next move. She spread files across a long conference table, photos of Elijah's medals beside documents outlining Manning's disciplinary record. Sergeant Alvarez leaned over her shoulder. "You sure you want to open that can of worms?" he asked. "Going after the department itself, not just Manning?" Rhodes's voice was firm. "This isn't about one man anymore. Manning is a symptom. The department ignored years of complaints, let him escalate unchecked. If we prove systemic negligence, the jury will see Manning for what he is, protected rot." Elijah sat across the table, flag folded neatly in front of him. "You'll make enemies," he said quietly. Rhodes glanced at him. I already have, but if your courage can stand in that courtroom, mine can stand in here. Meanwhile, Manning paced his apartment, rage boiling beneath his skin. His lawyer urged calm, but Manning's voice cracked with fury. They're crucifying me! That courtroom is stacked against me. The jury's eating out of Parker's hand. I need leverage. The lawyer rubbed his temples. We're filing motions to discredit Rhodes, paint her as politically ambitious. We'll drag Parker's record deeper into the mud. If we can sow doubt, even a sliver, we might hang the jury. Manning slammed his fist on the table. Doubt won't save me. I need to destroy him. Day 3 of the trial brought more fireworks. Rhodes called Sergeant Jenkins to the stand, a serving officer who had filed complaints against Manning years earlier. Sergeant Jenkins, Rhodes said, her voice even, did you ever witness Officer Manning use excessive force? Jenkins shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to where Manning sat glaring. Yes, he said finally, on multiple occasions, against civilians who posed no threat. And what happened when you reported it? My complaints went nowhere. The department buried them, said I was overreacting. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Manning's attorney leapt to his feet. Objection! Irrelevant character assassination. Judge Whitaker shook his head. Overruled. Continue. Jenkins's testimony cracked the shield. For the first time, the jury heard from someone inside the force. Someone who confirmed Manning wasn't a lone mistake, but a product of negligence. Outside, Amanda Torres reported live. Today's testimony has shaken the city. An officer's account reveals a department unwilling to check its own. Protesters now demand not only Manning's conviction, but full accountability from leadership. The chants outside shifted. Justice for Elijah became Clean Up Brookdale PD. That evening, Elijah returned to the shelter, exhausted but steady. He sat in the courtyard, the folded flag on his lap, staring at the sky. A young volunteer approached timidly. Mr. Parker, she said, my dad served too. He never came home the same. Watching you, it gives me hope. Thank you. Elijah gave a faint smile. Hope's a heavy thing to carry, but worth it. Pastor Green joined him, resting a hand on his shoulder. You've done more in a week than most men do in a lifetime, Elijah. Don't forget, you're not carrying this alone. But Manning wasn't idle. Late that night, a video surfaced online. Grainy footage of Elijah in his lowest moments, scavenging through trash bins, muttering to himself during a PTSD episode. The clip was paired with captions. This is your hero? It spread fast, pushed by anonymous accounts and fringe outlets. By morning, the smear dominated part of the news cycle. Commentators debated whether Elijah was stable enough to be trusted. Some painted him as a broken man, unfit for sainthood. At the shelter, Elijah stared at the footage replaying on a TV. His shoulders sagged. They'll never see past the scars, he whispered. Rhodes Gusta stood beside him, anger flashing in her eyes. Then we show them scars aren't weakness, they're survival. Alvarez clenched his fists. Manning's desperate, that video is his last card. Elijah looked down at the flag, then straightened, resolve hardening. Then tomorrow, I'll remind them of the truth. Not who I was in the shadows, but who I am in the light. That night, vigils outside the courthouse grew larger. Veterans held candles, their silence louder than chants. Across the street, Manning's supporters shouted through megaphones, but their noise was swallowed by the sight of hundreds of flags raised in the dark. Amanda Torres's report captured it perfectly. Brookdale is divided by noise, but united by one man's dignity. Tomorrow may decide which side the jury hears louder. The courthouse steps felt heavier that morning. The smear video of Elijah Parker had dominated headlines overnight, replayed endlessly on cable shows, and dissected by commentators who had never once slept outside. Is Parker unstable? One headline asked. A hero or a broken man? Another teased. Elijah walked up the courthouse stairs with the flag in his arms, the weight of a nation's doubt pressing on his shoulders. The chants outside were louder, more conflicted than before. His supporters held signs reading, "Scars are strength," while Manning's defenders shouted, "He's no hero." Sergeant Alvarez moved closer, murmuring, "Don't let their noise inside your head. You've been through worse." Elijah's lips tightened into a grim line. Noise never scared me. Silence did. Inside, the gallery was packed, the air electric with tension. Judge Whitaker called the session to order. Manning sat stiffly at the defense table, smugness tugging at the corners of his mouth. His lawyer rose immediately. Your Honor, new evidence has surfaced questioning the credibility of Mr. Parker. We have video footage demonstrating erratic behavior, consistent with instability. The screen flickered to life, playing the grainy clip. Elijah digging through a trash bin, muttering, his beard longer, eyes haunted. Gasps swept the room. Manning smirked. The lawyer turned to the jury. This is the man the prosecution paints as a paragon of dignity. This is the so-called hero whose testimony you're asked to believe. Rhodes brought the shot to her feet. Objection. This footage is inflammatory and taken out of context. Judge Whitaker frowned. Overruled. The jury will consider it with caution. The defense attorney pressed on. Mr. Parker may have served, but clearly he's a man shattered, unreliable, not fit to stand as a credible witness. The words hung in the air like poison. When Rhodes called Elijah back to the stand to respond, the courtroom fell into a hush. He carried the flag with him, set it gently on the witness stand, and looked straight at the jury. I saw the video too, Elijah began, voice low but steady, and I won't deny it. That was me, hungry, lost, talking to ghosts only I could hear. The room shifted uncomfortably. Manning's smirk widened. But let me tell you what that video doesn't show, Elijah continued, his eyes fierce. It doesn't show the 22 years I wore this nation's uniform. It doesn't show the men I carried off battlefields, the friends I buried beneath this flag. It doesn't show the nights I woke screaming from dreams of sand and fire. It doesn't show the medals I never asked for, or the blood I can't wash off my hands. The jury leaned in. Elijah's voice grew stronger. You see scars and you call them weakness, but I see scars and I call them proof. Proof that I survived what should have killed me. Proof that I stood for something greater than myself. Proof that even when I was broken, I wasn't worthless. He placed a hand on the flag, his knuckles trembling. Yes, I dug through trash. Yes, I slept on concrete, but none of that erases who I am. None of that erases the truth of what Officer Manning did to me. And if you think my scars make me less, then you don't understand what survival means. Silence blanketed the courtroom. Even Manning's attorney faltered, shifting his papers nervously. In the gallery, veterans rose quietly, one by one, saluting. Their silence carried more weight than 1,000 chants. Cameras captured it, sending the image rippling across the country in real time. Rhodes stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defense tried to bury Mr. Parker with his lowest moments. Instead, he's shown you the highest truth, that dignity isn't about never falling, it's about standing back up. His scars don't weaken his testimony, they strengthen it. Judge Whitaker called for order, but the image of veterans standing with Elijah lingered like a living verdict. During recess, Elijah stepped into the hallway, sweat dampening his collar. Pastor Green approached, clasping his shoulder. You turned their weapon into a shield. They'll never forget that. Elijah exhaled slowly. I didn't do it for me. I did it because every man sleeping outside tonight deserves to be seen as human, not invisible. Amanda Torres, microphone in hand, caught him before he could return to the courtroom. Mr. Parker, the nation just watched you dismantle a smear campaign with your own truth. Do you have anything to say to those who doubt you? Elijah looked into the camera, his eyes unflinching. To doubt me is fine. To doubt the dignity of every man and woman like me, that's what I can't accept. We've carried this country. It's time this country carries us. That night, news networks played Elijah's testimony alongside the veteran's silent salute. Analysts called it the moment the trial turned. Hashtag surged, Haj scars are. Strength and Haj stand with Elijah. Donations to veterans' shelters skyrocketed. But in Manning's apartment, the mood was darker. He hurled a glass against the wall, shattering it. They're making him a saint. One more day like this and I'm finished. His lawyer muttered, then we'll have to push harder. We can still spin the jury. Manning leaned close, voice venomous. Spin all you want. If this trial ruins me, I'll take him down with me. The storm outside the courthouse had shifted. The people had seen Elijah not as broken, but as unbreakable. And Manning knew he was running out of cards to play. Brookdale awoke to the sound of helicopters circling overhead, their cameras aimed at the courthouse steps. The trial had become more than a local spectacle. It was a national referendum on justice, respect, and the weight of truth. Outside the courthouse, two walls of people faced off again. On one side, veterans stood shoulder to shoulder, flags in their hands, their silence unshakable. On the other, Manning's supporters chanted with anger, clutching signs that read, "Back the Blue," and "Trial by Media." Inside, the jurors filed into the courtroom, their faces drawn, carrying the fatigue of people who knew the eyes of a nation rested on their shoulders. Judge Whitaker's gavel called for order, but even his voice carried the strain of the storm surrounding them. Rhodes rose to continue the prosecution's case. She called Dr. Lena Porter, a psychologist who specialized in veterans' trauma. The woman spoke clearly, her tone both clinical and compassionate. Mr. Parker's struggles with homelessness and PTSD are not signs of unreliability. They're evidence of the cost of service. His behavior is consistent with many veterans who've faced long deployments, repeated trauma, and inadequate support upon returning home. The defense attorney tried to twist her words. "So you're saying PTSD doesn't affect memory? That's convenient." Dr. Porter didn't flinch. "PTSD affects memory of trauma events, yes, but it doesn't erase truth. Mr. Parker has described the incident with Officer Manning consistently. His scars don't diminish his credibility, they highlight the resilience of his testimony." The jury nodded slowly, the logic settling. Manning sat at the defense table, face flushed with frustration. He whispered furiously to his lawyer, "She's killing us. The jury's buying every word." His lawyer hissed back, "Calm down, we'll counter and cross." But when he did, his questions came off petty, even cruel. "So are you telling this court that every homeless veteran is a saint? That we can't question them?" Dr. Porter's response was razor sharp. "No, sir. I'm telling this court that respect is owed to every veteran, whether they're housed in a mansion or sleeping under a bridge." The gallery erupted in murmurs, Judge Whitaker slamming the gavel for order. During recess, Elijah sat in the courthouse hallway, head bowed, flag clutched tightly. The air smelled faintly of coffee and tension. Pastor Green sat beside him. "You feel the weight, don't you?" Elijah nodded. "Not just for me, for all the men and women I served with who didn't come home to parades, just silence." Green's voice softened. "And now, because of you, their silence is breaking." Back in the courtroom, the defense tried to shift the narrative by calling character witnesses for Manning, fellow officers who painted him as tough but fair. One, Officer Daniels testified, "Manning has always been a man of action, maybe rough around the edges but dedicated. He's not a racist, he's just a cop doing his job." Rhodes stood slowly for cross-examination. "Officer Daniels, did you ever witness complaints filed against Manning?" Daniels hesitated. "I heard things. And did you ever report misconduct yourself?" A pause. "No." "Why not?" "Because nothing would have changed." The words slipped out like a confession, heavy and damning. The jury scribbled notes. Daniels's face paled as he realized what he'd admitted. Not just Manning's guilt, but the rot in the system that shielded him. Outside the courthouse, Amanda Torres reported live. Testimony today revealed a culture of silence inside Brookdale PD. Supporters of Elijah Parker argue this case is no longer just about one officer, but about accountability across the force. The chants outside shifted again. "No more silence! No more silence!" That night, the jury was escorted out under heavy guard, their identities hidden, but the strain showed in their eyes. They had heard Elijah's scars turned into strength, Manning's defenders faltering under the weight of truth, and experts dismantling the smear. The burden on them grew heavier by the hour. Meanwhile, in his apartment, Manning seethed. He hurled a chair against the wall, glass shattering across the floor. His lawyer tried to calm him. "Losing your temper won't help. We still have closing arguments. We can still spin this." Manning's voice was raw, trembling with rage. "Spin? They're making Parker a saint! If I go down, I'll drag him with me." His lawyer's silence was uneasy. At the shelter, Elijah sat with Alvarez and Rhodes, the flag spread carefully across the table. Rhodes leaned forward. "Tomorrow, we'll be close to closing arguments. Manning's team is unraveling, but we can't underestimate desperation. He's dangerous when cornered." Elijah's hand smoothed the fabric of the flag. "I've lived through desperate men before. They do the most damage when they know they've lost." Alvarez added, "Then we stay vigilant, and we finish this." That night, vigils outside the courthouse grew larger. Veterans, families, and strangers lit candles, holding them high in the night air. Across the street, Manning's supporters grew louder, more aggressive, but their chants faltered when news outlets replayed Daniels's reluctant admission. Amanda Torres's broadcast ended with an image that struck the nation. Elijah Parker walking quietly past the vigil, flag in his arms, candles flickering in reflection on the cloth. She closed with, "In a city divided by noise, one man's quiet dignity continues to lead." By dawn, Brookdale streets were barricaded, patrol cars forming steel walls between opposing crowds. Reporters said the trial had become a second war zone, and looking out the window of the veterans' shelter, Elijah Parker couldn't disagree. He rose quietly, folding the flag with practiced precision, and whispered to himself, "Another day, another battle." Sergeant Alvarez entered, wearing a bulletproof vest beneath his jacket. "Crowds are twice as big this morning, cops on edge, counter-protesters spoiling for a fight. If you testify again, we'll get you through, but keep your head down." Elijah nodded. "I've been under fire before." Alvarez gave a grim smile. "Yeah, but this fire spreads faster." Inside the courthouse, the gallery was so crowded that bailiffs had to turn people away. Judge Whitaker pounded his gavel before the first word was spoken. "This court will maintain order. Anyone disrupting will be removed." The prosecution called their final witnesses, community leaders who testified about the ripple effects of Elijah's mistreatment. A teacher described students asking why veterans could be treated like trash. A pastor recounted families questioning whether justice applied to them at all. Each story painted Manning not as an isolated incident, but a fracture in trust that reached every corner of Brookdale. The defense countered by calling Manning himself. He walked to the stand with stiff shoulders, chin high, trying to project confidence. His lawyer guided him gently. "Officer Manning, tell us what you saw that night." Manning's tone was flat, rehearsed. "I saw a vagrant loitering, refusing to move. I acted to enforce the ordinance." The lawyer nodded. "Did you know he was a veteran?" "No." "Did you intend disrespect?" "No, I intended law and order." The lawyer smiled faintly, as if expecting sympathy. Then Rhodes stepped forward for cross-examination. "Officer Manning," she began smoothly, "do you recognize this?" She held up a still image from the video, his boot making contact, Elijah's medals scattering. Manning's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Do you see a threat in this image?" He hesitated. "A man refusing to comply." Rhodes's voice sharpened. "A man sitting quietly, holding a flag, kicked to the ground. That's compliance?" Manning flushed red. "You're twisting this." "No, officer, the video doesn't twist. It shows." The gallery murmured, Judge Whitaker banging the gavel for silence. Rhodes leaned closer. "Tell me, when those medals spilled, did you bend down to pick them up? Did you show a shred of respect?" Manning's silence was answer enough. During recess, the courthouse erupted outside. Chants grew louder, insults hurled across barricades. Bottles flew, police rushed in to push crowds back. Amanda Torres reported live, voice raised above the cates. Brookdale is at a boiling point, supporters of both sides clashing outside as the trial reaches its most heated moment yet. Tensions are threatening to spill over. Elijah, escorted by Alvarez, paused on the courthouse steps, watching the chaos unfold. The folded flag in his arms caught the sunlight, drawing eyes toward him. For a brief moment, both crowds fell silent, staring at the solitary figure who bore the storm with quiet dignity. But the silence shattered as a counter-protester screamed, "Fraud!" and hurled a stone that clattered against the barricade. Alvarez shoved Elijah forward. "Inside, now!" That night, security footage from the clash looped across national news. Analysts warned the trial had gone beyond one man. It was now testing whether the system could withstand its own cracks. In the shelter, Elijah sat with Pastor Green, staring at the screen. "Feels like the war followed me home," he murmured. Green placed a hand on his shoulder. "Wars end, Elijah. This one too. But sometimes they have to burn hot before they burn out." Meanwhile, Manning paced his lawyer's office, fury in his eyes. "They're painting me as the devil. Did you see the jury? They're slipping." His lawyer tried to calm him. "Tomorrow we'll hammer Parker's credibility again. Plant just enough doubt." Manning slammed his fist on the desk. "Doubt won't save me. If I go down, I'll drag him into the dirt with me. Watch me." The lawyer paled but said nothing. As midnight fell, Brookdale's courthouse square became a sea of candles. Veterans held vigil, their silence lit by flickering flames. Across the street, counter-protesters tried to shout them down, but their chants grew weaker against the glow of hundreds standing united. Amanda Torres narrated softly, almost reverently. "In a city tearing itself apart, one man's scars have become the thread holding it together. Tomorrow, closing arguments will decide which story the jury believes, the smear or the truth. Inside his shelter room, Elijah sat at his desk, notebook open. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote, "If tomorrow is the end, let it end with truth. I've carried men through fire. I can carry this one more mile." He closed the notebook, placed the flag over it, and whispered into the silence, "For them." The courthouse buzzed like a hornet's nest that morning. The trial had stretched for weeks, and now the air was thick with expectation. Crowds outside swelled beyond the barricades, reporters climbing ladders for a better view, cameras flashing at every movement. Inside, Judge Whitaker adjusted his glasses and struck the gavel. "We will now hear closing arguments. I expect order in this courtroom." Dana Rhodes rose first. She walked deliberately to the jury box, a file in her hands, but her eyes steady and unflinching. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm but edged with steel, "you've heard the testimony. You've seen the video. You've listened to experts, to witnesses, to Mr. Parker himself. This case is not about politics. It is not about sides. It is about dignity. A decorated war hero was treated like trash on a sidewalk by the very man sworn to serve and protect. His medals scattered on the ground, his flag trampled. That is not law and order. That is abuse." She stepped closer, lowering her tone, drawing the jury in. "The defense tried to distract you with smear campaigns. They showed you his scars, hoping you would mistake them for shame. But Elijah Parker stood here and told you the truth. Scars don't erase truth. Scars are proof that he survived battles most of us can't even imagine. And when he was attacked in his own city, he stood again, not with violence but with dignity." Rhodes pointed to the still image of Manning's boot striking Elijah's side. Frozen on the courtroom screen, this is not a man doing his job. This is a man who thought he could kick another human being into silence, but the truth spoke louder. She paused, letting the silence settle. "Your verdict will echo beyond this room. It will tell this city and this nation whether dignity belongs to all of us or only to some. I ask you to find justice. I ask you to convict Officer Richard Manning." The gallery hummed with quiet agreement. Veterans in the back straightened, some dabbing at their eyes. Then Manning's lawyer rose, straightening his tie, his smile sharp. He strode confidently toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "you've heard a story, crafted beautifully, delivered with emotion. But this is not a movie. This is law, and the law requires facts, not feelings." He gestured toward Manning, who sat stiffly at the defense table. "My client is a police officer. He was enforcing an ordinance against loitering. He encountered a man on the sidewalk, uncooperative and unstable. Did he act roughly? Perhaps. But roughness is not a crime. Kicking a bag is not assault. Don't let theatrics cloud your judgment." The lawyer's voice grew sharper. "Yes, Mr. Parker served. Yes, he has scars. But service does not grant sainthood. And scars do not equal credibility. You saw the video of him in the streets, muttering, unstable. Ask yourselves, are you prepared to convict a good cop on the testimony of a man who cannot even manage his own life?" A murmur rippled through the gallery. Manning's lawyer leaned closer, voice dripping with condescension. "Sympathy is not evidence. Pity is not proof. The state wants you to deliver a verdict based on heartstrings. But your duty is to deliver it based on law. And the law says Officer Manning is not guilty." He straightened, smoothed his jacket, and returned to his seat. Manning smirked faintly, as if victory was within reach. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Whitaker addressed the jury. "Members of the jury, you have heard the arguments. You will deliberate carefully, guided by the law and the evidence presented. Court is adjourned until your verdict is reached." The gavel struck. Outside, chaos erupted. Supporters of Elijah Parker cheered Rhodes's argument, chanting, "Justice for Elijah!" Counter-protesters shouted just as loudly, their voices clashing in the square. Police strained to keep order. Amanda Torres's live broadcast captured the scene. Closing arguments have ignited Brookdale. For some, this is about one man's dignity. For others, it's about defending law enforcement. The jury now carries the weight of a nation divided. Back inside, Elijah sat quietly with Rhodes and Alvarez in a side chamber. His hands rested on the folded flag, his face calm but weary. "You spoke for me," he told Rhodes softly. Rhodes gave a tired smile. "No, Elijah, you spoke for yourself. I just reminded them to listen." Alvarez leaned back in his chair. "Now it's up to 12 strangers." Elijah looked down at the flag, whispering, 12 strangers who'll decide if scars are strength or shame. That night, the jury was sequestered in a guarded hotel, their deliberations closed to the world. Inside their room, voices rose and fell, debates stretching into the night. Some argued Manning was a cop under pressure, others insisted the video was undeniable. In the shelter, Elijah wrote in his notebook, I survived fire abroad, now I wait for fire at home. If truth is heavy, let them carry it long enough to feel its weight. Outside, the vigil of veterans grew larger, candles flickering in the cold night air. Across the barricades, Manning's supporters shouted themselves hoarse, but the glow of silent flags carried further than noise. The jury room was a world apart from the chaos outside, but the tension inside was no less suffocating. 12 people sat around a heavy oak table, folders and notepads scattered across its surface. The blinds were drawn, the air stale. Juror number 6, a middle-aged teacher, broke the silence first. We all saw the video. He kicked that man. That's assault, plain and simple. Juror number 3, a retired cop, bristled. You don't know what it's like on the streets. Split-second decisions. Manning thought Parker was unstable. He was enforcing the law. But he wasn't resisting, the teacher countered. He was sitting, resting, holding a flag. The room erupted in voices, arguments bouncing like bullets. Some spoke of duty, others of dignity. Each time Elijah's words were recalled, scars don't erase truth. The debate quieted, but never for long. Outside, Brookdale's courthouse square looked like a divided battlefield. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with candles, their silence powerful. Across the barricades, Manning's supporters shouted themselves raw, accusing the system of betrayal. Police lines strained under the pressure, their radios crackling with warnings of scuffles breaking out on side streets. Amanda Torres's live report painted the picture. The jury deliberates behind closed doors, but the city waits on edge. Brookdale has become the center of a storm testing not just one man's fate, but the meaning of justice itself. Inside the courthouse, Elijah sat with Rhodes and Alvarez in a holding room. The flag rested on his lap, his fingers running along the folds. You ever think the truth might not be enough? Elijah asked quietly. Rhodes studied him. Truth doesn't always win, Elijah, but when it does, it changes everything. Alvarez leaned forward. Don't let doubt eat you alive. The jury saw you, they heard you. That carries more weight than Manning's lies. Elijah gave a tired smile. I carried brothers through fire, Alvarez. Waiting on 12 strangers feels heavier. Meanwhile, Manning paced in his lawyer's office, nerves fraying. He slammed his palm against the wall. Why aren't they done yet? It's obvious. I was doing my job. His lawyer sighed, exhausted. It's not obvious to them. Parker's testimony hit hard. If even one juror believes him, we're in trouble. Manning's eyes burned with fury. I'm not going down for this. Not for some homeless vet they dragged out as a martyr. The lawyer lowered his voice. If the jury convicts, we appeal. If they acquit, then this storm blows over. Manning muttered, it won't blow over. Not for me, not ever. Back in the jury room, hours ticked by. Juror number 9, a young nurse, spoke softly. Look, I've treated vets. PTSD is real, but it doesn't erase truth. Parker was honest. You could see it in his eyes. Juror number 11, a businessman, shook his head. But are we convicting based on feelings? His testimony was moving, sure, but the law doesn't excuse brutality, the nurse shot back. The teacher leaned in. This case isn't about perfection, it's about respect. Did Manning respect Parker? No, he kicked him like garbage. That's not policing, that's abuse. The retired cop's jaw clenched, but even he couldn't argue with the video playing again in his mind. The boot, the medals, the flag. As night fell, the jury was escorted to their sequestered hotel. The city outside roared with tension. Police deployed riot gear as skirmishes broke out, protest signs snapped into makeshift shields, and chants collided like thunder. Inside the veterans' vigil, Pastor Green spoke softly to the gathered crowd. We don't know what verdict tomorrow will bring. But we know this. Elijah Parker has already shown this city the meaning of dignity. And that truth can't be erased. Candles flickered higher, shadows dancing against the courthouse walls. Across the barricades, Manning's supporters shouted louder, but their noise could not pierce the silence of flags held steady in the night. Back in the shelter, Elijah wrote in his notebook. His words were steady despite the storm outside. If they acquit him, then scars will remain unhealed. If they convict him, then maybe justice breathes for once. Either way, I stood, and I carried truth as far as I could. He closed the notebook, draped the flag gently over it, and whispered, "Tomorrow, we'll see if they hear it." Amanda Torres ended her live segment with words that carried across the country. Tonight, Brookdale waits in the dark, divided by noise but bound by one decision. Tomorrow, the jury will decide not only Officer Manning's fate, but the weight of Elijah Parker's truth. The camera panned across the square, candles glowing on one side, angry chants on the other, before settling on the courthouse doors, where history waited to be written. The courthouse bell struck 9, its echoes swallowed by the roar of crowds already gathered outside. Reporters leaned against barricades, microphones ready. The vigil of veterans still held candles, though daylight dulled their glow. Across the square, Manning's supporters waved banners that screamed "Back the Blue" and "Justice for Cops." Inside, the jury filed back into their chamber, faces drawn and pale. The previous night's debates lingered in the air like smoke. Juror number 6, the teacher, spoke first, her voice weary but firm. "We can't drag this forever. We saw the video. He's guilty." Juror number 3, the retired cop, crossed his arms. "You don't know what it's like wearing a badge. Split-second choices. You can't convict a man for doing his job." The young nurse, juror number 9, leaned forward. "Doing his job? Kicking a veteran, spilling medals on the street, trampling a flag? That's not a job. That's cruelty." The businessman, juror number 11, raised a hand. "But the law requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What if Manning honestly thought Parker was unstable? Then he should have spoken, not struck," the teacher shot back. Silence followed. The weight of the decision pressed on every chest. In the courtroom, Elijah waited with Rhodes and Alvarez in a side chamber. The folded flag sat in his lap, his hands tracing the seams. "They've been in there since yesterday," Alvarez muttered. "Juries don't take this long unless they're split." Rhodes nodded grimly. "Deadlock's possible. If they can't agree, it's a mistrial." Elijah's voice was calm, though his eyes carried storm clouds. "And if it's a mistrial, Manning walks free." "Not free," Rhodes corrected. "We retry, but the damage—" Elijah looked down at the flag. "My brothers didn't get second trials. Why should he?" Meanwhile, Manning paced his lawyer's office like a caged animal. Sweat beaded on his brow. "They're taking too long," he hissed. "If they believed me, they'd be back already." His lawyer tried to soothe him. "Deadlock can work in our favor. Mistrial means no conviction." Manning slammed his fist on the desk. "I don't want no conviction. I want my life back. I want them to stop calling me a racist thug on national TV." The lawyer didn't respond. Deep down, he knew that even a mistrial wouldn't wash away Manning's stain. Back in the jury room, tempers flared. Juror number 8, a college student, spoke hesitantly. "I didn't serve, but I've got family who did. What struck me wasn't just the kick, it was how Parker picked up his flag after. Like it meant more than his own body. That wasn't staged. That was real." The retired cop rubbed his temples. "Look, I don't like Manning either. He's arrogant. But once we start convicting cops for every rough move, we'll scare them from doing their jobs." The nurse snapped, "There's a difference between rough and ruthless. If we excuse this, we tell every cop it's fine to treat people like dirt," the teacher added softly, "and we tell every veteran their service ends the moment they step off the battlefield." The room fell into heavy silence again. Outside, the city simmered. Scuffles broke out between opposing crowds, forcing riot police to intervene. Smoke from flares drifted over the square. Amanda Torres stood live on air, voice urgent. "Brookdale teeters on the brink tonight. The jury remains locked in debate, and both sides here are growing restless. If a verdict doesn't come soon, this city may not hold." At the shelter, Pastor Green gathered with volunteers, watching coverage on a battered television. "If this jury fails, Brookdale won't forgive," he said quietly. One volunteer asked, "Do you think Parker can handle that?" Green shook his head. "He's carried more than any man should. But even strong men can break when justice turns away." As night fell, the jury sent a note to Judge Whitaker. "We are divided." The judge called both sides to the courtroom. The gallery filled in minutes, the air buzzing with nervous energy. Whitaker read the note aloud, his voice measured. "The jury reports they are unable to reach a unanimous decision." Gasps filled the room. Rhodes gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Manning allowed himself a faint smirk, thinking freedom was within reach. But then the judge continued. "However, I am instructing the jury to return and continue deliberations." This case carries weight beyond measure. I urge you to examine the evidence once more." The jurors filed back out, weary but resigned. Elijah sat rigid, flag across his lap, eyes locked on the door they had exited through. Rhodes whispered, "It's not over." Alvarez muttered, "But it's close to breaking." That night, Elijah returned to the shelter, unable to sleep. He opened his notebook and wrote under candlelight, "Justice is a battlefield with no clear lines. Tonight, 12 people decide if truth stands or falls. Tomorrow, I'll carry the flag back into that room, whether they honor it or not." He closed the book, placed the flag gently over it, and stared into the dark. Outside, the chants of the divided city echoed through the night. The morning sun rose over Brookdale like a warning flare, blood-orange light glinting off riot shields and camera lenses. Crowds had already gathered at dawn, their chants colliding in a wall of sound. Police in heavy gear stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes scanning for sparks that could ignite a firestorm. Inside the courthouse, the jury shuffled back into their room, exhaustion etched into their faces. Coffee cups and half-eaten sandwiches cluttered the table. The teacher pressed her palms against the wood. "We can't leave it like this. A mistrial won't heal this city." The retired cop shook his head, dark circles under his eyes. "Convicting a cop for one rough encounter sets a dangerous precedent." The nurse leaned forward, fire in her eyes. "And excusing him sets an even worse one. We'll be saying veterans, homeless, black, poor, none of them matter." Juror number 8, the college student, whispered, "What's dignity worth if we can't even defend it here?" Their words hung heavy. The scale of justice teetered, fragile, uncertain. Elijah Parker sat quietly in a holding room nearby, the folded flag on his knees. Sergeant Alvarez paced, his nerves visible. Rhodes leaned against the wall, reviewing notes she'd already memorized 100 times. Elijah's voice broke the silence. "If they can't decide, does all of this mean nothing?" Rhodes looked at him, steady. "No, you've already changed more than you know. But yes, if it's a mistrial, Manning walks for now." Elijah pressed his hand to the flag. "I've buried brothers under this cloth. If they call it nothing, then their sacrifice echoes into silence." Alvarez stopped pacing, his jaw tight. "Then we fight again, but I'll be damned if he walks without the world knowing who he really is." Meanwhile, Manning sat in a secure room with his lawyer, smugness creeping back onto his face. "They're stuck," he said, smirking. "I can feel it. Deadlock means mistrial, and mistrial means I walk." His lawyer frowned. "Walking free doesn't mean cleared. The department's under fire, investigations are piling up. Even if you escape conviction, you won't escape consequences." Manning leaned in, eyes flashing. "Let them investigate. Let them smear. If I'm going down, I'll take Parker's Saint Act with me." The lawyer's silence was more telling than any argument. By mid-afternoon, tensions outside cracked wide open. A counter-protester hurled a bottle across the barricade, striking a veteran's shoulder. Chaos erupted. Police surged forward, batons raised as fists flew in the crowd. Amanda Torres, broadcasting live, ducked as the camera shook. "Brookdale is exploding. Protesters and counter-protesters are clashing in the streets. Police are struggling to regain control." The feed cut briefly before returning to scenes of chaos. Tear gas spilling across the square, people stumbling, flags and signs trampled underfoot. Back in the courthouse, the noise filtered through the walls like distant thunder. Judge Whitaker called for calm, but even his gavel couldn't drown the tension. He summoned the jury to the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've received word of unrest outside. I remind you, your duty is to the evidence, not the noise. Continue deliberations with focus." The jurors filed back out, but their faces were pale, the weight heavier than before. During recess, Elijah stepped into the hallway, escorted by Alvarez. Reporters swarmed, microphones shoved forward. "Elijah, what do you think of the violence outside? Do you fear a mistrial? Do you regret testifying?" Elijah stopped, raising his voice so it carried over the chaos. "I regret nothing. If they call me broken, so be it. If they call me guilty of surviving, so be it. But I will not regret standing with dignity, and I will not regret carrying this flag for my brothers who cannot speak." The hallway fell silent. Cameras captured his every word, broadcasting them live across the nation. In the jury room, the words replayed on television as they debated. The teacher spoke softly. "That man doesn't ask for pity. He asks for dignity. We can't mistrial dignity." The retired cop rubbed his eyes. "I swore to uphold the badge. But maybe upholding the badge means admitting when one of our own disgraces it." The nurse whispered, "Then vote. Vote like dignity matters." One by one, hands began to rise. That night, the courthouse square was under lockdown, floodlights blazing. Police lines held firm as helicopters circled. But amid the chaos, a small circle of veterans still stood with candles, their silence defying the noise. Inside the shelter, Elijah wrote by dim light, "The city breaks around me, but truth does not break. Tomorrow may bring verdict or mistrial. Either way, I've carried this as far as I can. The rest belongs to 12 strangers and to the country watching." He folded the notebook, placed the flag over it, and closed his eyes, hearing the muffled chants outside as Brookdale teetered between fire and truth. The courthouse the next morning stood like a fortress. Riot fences had been doubled. Police in full gear patrolled every corner, and news vans lined the streets with satellite dishes aimed skyward. Brookdale was no longer just a city, it was the stage for the nation's reckoning. Inside, the jury trudged back into their chamber, faces pale with exhaustion. The teacher tapped her pen against the table. "We're close. Yesterday, most of us leaned toward conviction." The retired cop exhaled heavily. "I'm not blind. Manning went too far. But part of me still hesitates, because convicting him feels like convicting every cop I ever knew." The nurse leaned in, her voice sharp but compassionate. "This isn't about every cop. It's about one man who disgraced the badge. Don't confuse loyalty with justice." The student juror whispered, "If we can't decide, the city will burn." The businessman countered, "We can't let fear of riots dictate our verdict." The teacher replied, "We're not choosing between riots and peace. We're choosing between justice and denial." Silence stretched, the weight of 12 decisions pressing heavier with each hour. In a holding room, Elijah sat with Rhodes and Alvarez, his flag folded neatly in his lap. The noise outside leaked through the walls, chants, sirens, the hum of helicopters. Rhodes has studied him. "The jury's moving, we might hear something soon." Elijah nodded faintly. "I've waited in foxholes for worse, waiting's a soldier's curse." Alvarez gave a half smile. "Except this foxhole's full of cameras." Elijah chuckled softly, then grew serious. "I don't need sainthood, I just need the truth to outlast the lies." Meanwhile, Manning unraveled. He paced his lawyer's office, muttering curses, his fists clenching. "They're dragging this out to crucify me," he growled. Parker turned them into puppets with his sob story. "Did you see those veterans saluting him in court? They're brainwashing the jury." His lawyer spoke carefully, measuring each word. "If the jury convicts, we appeal. If it's a mistrial, you walk, for now. Either way, don't give them more ammunition." Manning slammed his fist on the desk. "Don't tell me to sit still. My life's on fire while that bum basks in glory." The lawyer didn't answer, but his silence was telling. Back in the jury room, the debate reached its breaking point. The teacher spoke firmly. "We've danced around this for too long. Vote again." One by one, slips of paper were filled, folded, passed to the foreperson. The air felt electric, every shuffle of paper like thunder. The foreperson read them aloud. "Guilty. Guilty. Guilty. Not guilty. Guilty. Guilty." The final tally, 10 for guilty, 2 for not guilty. The room exhaled as though struck by lightning. The retired cop stared at the table. "I can't. Not yet." The businessman echoed, "Neither can I. Not until every doubt is gone." The teacher pressed her hands together. "Then face your doubt. Look at the video. Look at Parker's testimony. Ask yourself, was that law and order or cruelty?" The nurse added softly, "We're not convicting every cop. We're convicting one who forgot what his badge meant." The retired cop's jaw worked. His silence was louder than words. Outside, Brookdale cracked under tension. Protesters clashed again. Chants drowned in the clash of shields and the hiss of tear gas. Cameras caught every second, the footage streaming across the country. Amanda Torres stood at the edge of the chaos, reporting live. The city is on edge. Everyone knows the jury is close, and the question is whether Brookdale and America can handle the answer. That night, Elijah returned to the shelter, unable to sleep. He opened his notebook and wrote by dim light. "They said the battlefield was behind me. They lied. The battlefield is here, in this city, in this courthouse, in the hearts of 12 strangers. I carried men through fire. Now I carry truth through doubt. Tomorrow, maybe, we see if it survives." He placed the flag over the notebook and sat in silence, listening to the muffled shouts outside. The jury, meanwhile, sat in their guarded hotel, replaying the video again and again on the screen provided. The boot, the medals, the flag. Every time the truth cut deeper. The nurse whispered, "How can anyone watch that and call it justice?" The retired cop rubbed his face, weariness breaking his resolve. Maybe it's time I admit what I don't want to see." The businessman added, "Then tomorrow we finish this." At dawn, the courthouse bell tolled again, its echoes swallowed by the restless city. The jury filed back into their chamber for what could be their final day, and Elijah Parker, flag in hand, whispered to himself, "For them, always for them." The courthouse bell tolled again at sunrise, deep and foreboding, its echoes swallowed by the restless city. The air felt like it carried smoke, even though no fire had yet begun. Veterans stood silently with flags across their shoulders, candles melted to stubs in their hands. Across the barricades, Manning's supporters beat drums and shouted into megaphones, their chants sharp and furious. The police line between them looked thinner by the hour, as though one spark might consume everything. Inside, the jury sat around the oak table, papers spread, eyes red-rimmed with fatigue. The teacher broke the silence. "We are at 10-2. It cannot stay that way." The retired cop sat rigid, arms crossed, but his voice was softer than before. "You think I don't see the boot? The medals? I see it every time we play the video, but admitting guilt here feels like betraying the badge I wore for 30 years. The nurse leaned forward, her voice steady. "No. Convicting him is saving the badge, because what he did disgraced it. Loyalty isn't silence. Loyalty is standing for what's right." The businessman, the second holdout, shifted uncomfortably. What if we're wrong? What if history paints us as the jury that turned on a cop because of pressure outside? The teacher's tone sharpened. And what if history paints us as the jury that excused brutality caught on camera because we were too afraid to see it? Their words weighed heavy, the truth pressing like iron on their chests. In the holding room, Elijah sat with Rhodes and Alvarez. The flag lay across his knees, his fingers running along the seams. "They're close," Rhodes whispered. "Too close for Manning to feel safe." Alvarez nodded grimly. "He's going to lash out. Mark my words." Elijah gave a faint smile, though his eyes carried shadows. "I've faced men with guns and men with silence. Both are dangerous when cornered." Rhodes reached out, her hand brushing the edge of the flag. "Whatever happens, you've already forced the city to look at itself. That matters, Elijah, more than the verdict." He met her eyes, steady. "A verdict is more than words on paper. It's a message. To every man sleeping under a bridge tonight, wondering if his service meant anything. They need that message to be clear." Meanwhile, Manning's fury reached a fever pitch. In his lawyer's office, he stormed like a trapped wolf. "They're dragging this out to make me sweat," he shouted. "The jury's weak. They're bending to Parker's sob story." His lawyer tried to stay calm. "If they were ready to convict, they'd have done it already. The split means hope. Don't throw it away." Manning slammed his fist against the wall. "Hope? They've turned me into the devil of this city? If I go down, I'll drag Parker into the dirt with me." The lawyer's silence grew longer. At last he muttered, "Maybe stop thinking about revenge and start thinking about survival." Manning's eyes burned. "Survival's all I know. And survival means making sure they never forget I don't bow." By noon, the jury requested another playback of the video. Once again, the screen filled with the brutal clarity. Manning's boot striking Elijah, the medals scattering, the flag falling to the ground. The teacher whispered, "That's not law, that's cruelty." The retired cop closed his eyes, his voice rough. "My father was a vet. If someone had kicked him like that, maybe I'd be on the other side of this table." The businessman, pale, finally spoke. "I don't want to be remembered as the one who said scars don't matter." He stood there with dignity. "I can't deny that." The room stilled. 11 eyes turned toward the retired cop, the last holdout. He sat in silence, his loyalty to the badge warring with loyalty to truth. Outside, Brookdale cracked further. Protesters clashed, tear gas drifted, and sirens wailed. Amanda Torres reported live, her voice urgent. "The jury deliberates inside, but out here, the city is breaking. Skirmishes erupt at every corner. The people are demanding justice or bracing for betrayal." At the shelter that night, Elijah wrote in his notebook by candlelight, "They call me broken, but I have never felt stronger than standing with scars in plain sight. If tomorrow brings conviction, let it be for dignity. If tomorrow brings mistrial, then let it remind them truth cannot be silenced." He folded the notebook, placed the flag on top, and whispered, "For them. Always for them." As dawn crept in, the jury foreperson stood at the head of the table. "We're close. Tomorrow we must decide. This city cannot wait any longer." The retired cop looked down at his hands, scarred from years of service, and muttered, "Maybe it's time I protect the badge by admitting the truth." The room exhaled. The scales of justice tipped, though no verdict had yet been spoken. The courthouse square was a furnace of noise and fear. Helicopters droned overhead, riot shields gleamed under the morning sun, and chants clashed like thunder rolling across the city. One side cried, "Justice for Elijah," while the other shouted, "Back the blue!" The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and anticipation. Inside, the jury filed into the courtroom, faces pale, eyes heavy. The foreperson clutched a folded piece of paper as though it weighed more than stone. Judge Whitaker struck the gavel, and the sound cut through the murmurs. "This court will now come to order. Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood, voice trembling but clear. "We have, Your Honor." Elijah sat at the prosecution table, the folded flag resting on his lap. He kept his eyes on the jury, his hands steady though his chest thundered. Rhodes leaned forward, whispering, "Whatever comes, you've already won more than you know." At the defense table, Manning sat stiff, his jaw clenched, eyes darting between the jurors. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sweat dampening his collar. The foreperson unfolded the paper and read aloud. "In the case of the state of Brookdale versus Officer Richard Manning on the charge of assault, we the jury find the defendant." The courtroom held its breath. "Guilty!" Gasps swept the gallery. Some wept, others cheered, and a wave of murmurs rose like a storm. Judge Whitaker slammed the gavel for order. "Silence in the court!" Elijah closed his eyes, gripping the flag tighter. A tear slipped down his cheek, but his voice was steady when he whispered, "For them." Rhodes exhaled deeply, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. Alvarez grinned, clapping Elijah gently on the shoulder. "Justice, brother. Finally justice." At the defense table, Manning erupted. "This is a sham, a witch hunt. I was doing my job." His lawyer tried to restrain him, but Manning stood, shouting at the jury. "You think you've won? You think you're heroes? You're all blind." Judge Whitaker's gavel pounded. "Bailiffs, remove the defendant." Two officers grabbed Manning by the arms, dragging him out as he fought and cursed. Cameras captured every second, broadcasting his downfall live across the nation. Outside, when the verdict broke, the square exploded. On one side, cheers and tears filled the air, veterans raising flags high, chanting "Justice." On the other, Manning's supporters screamed betrayal, clashing with police as barricades shook. Amanda Torres's voice cut through the chaos on live broadcast. "History has just been made in Brookdale. Officer Richard Manning has been found guilty." The city reacts with both triumph and fury as the nation watches. Back inside, Elijah was escorted out a side door for safety. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. "Elijah, how do you feel? What does this verdict mean to you? What message do you have for America?" He stopped, turned to the cameras, and spoke with quiet strength. "This verdict isn't just for me. It's for every man and woman who wore this nation's uniform and came home to silence instead of thanks. It's for every homeless veteran who wonders if their scars make them invisible. Today, the jury said no. They make us undeniable. Dignity belongs to all of us. And no badge, no boot, no lie can take that away." The words rippled across the country, carried live into millions of homes. That night, Brookdale was still divided. Skirmishes flared in pockets, but the vigil of veterans grew larger, their candles lighting the courthouse steps like stars against the darkness. Elijah stood among them, the flag draped across his shoulders. Pastor Green clasped his hand. "You carried them, Elijah, and today the world carried you back." Alvarez smiled. "History books will write your name, brother, but more than that, they'll remember your dignity." Rhodes added softly, "You showed them that scars aren't weakness, they're proof of survival." Elijah looked up at the courthouse, its stone glowing in candlelight, and whispered, "Justice breathes tonight. For them. For all of us." In the days that followed, news anchors replayed his testimony, his words about scars, and the veterans' silent salute. Hashtags surged. Hashtag scars are strength and #justice for Elijah. Donations poured into shelters nationwide. Veteran stories filled airwaves, and Elijah Parker became a symbol not of pity, but of power. And Officer Richard Manning? His name was etched not in honor, but in disgrace, a cautionary tale of arrogance brought low by truth. Brookdale would heal slowly, its streets still scarred by division. But in the glow of candlelight outside the courthouse, a truth had been written that no gavel could erase. Dignity cannot be kicked away. Scars are not weakness, and justice, though slow, had stood tall at last.